Some stories, they just don't seem to want to stay in the past, do they?
Hmm.
The Titanic's one of them, over 100 years since it sank, and we're still kind of captivated.
Yeah.
And you're not just captivated, you've sent me like a whole stack of articles and blueprints about this Titanic too there. So we're diving deep into, well, this whole ambition to rebuild it.
It's a fascinating story to dive into for sure. I think the first thing that strikes me is just the ambition of it all. Trying to recreate something so iconic and, let's face it, so tragic. It makes you wonder why even rebuild it in the first place.
Right. It's not like there's a shortage of cruise ships these days.
Exactly.
So what is it about this particular ship, this one piece of history, that makes someone want to, I don't know, relive it?
I think it's more than just a ship, isn't it? The Titanic represents something, a whole era.
Hmm.
Opulence, those grand voyages across the ocean.
Right.
It taps into this nostalgia we have.
And not just any era, right? This is like the peak of the ocean liner.
Exactly.
It's not just about the ship itself, but everything it represents. Luxury, pushing the boundaries of what was possible.
Yeah.
That whole story of, well, triumph and tragedy. I mean, people still dress up for Titanic parties.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
that longing for a simpler time, or at least that's how we like to remember it. Like watching Downton Abbey, it's all very romanticized in our collective memory.
Yeah.
The glamour, the elegance.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, it's the illusion of simplicity. Things were slower then, less complicated than our modern world.
Right, right. It's like this ultimate historical experience actually going there, being on the Titanic. But it's not just some museum exhibit or a movie set, is it?
No, no, not at all.
This is a billionaire with, well, a dream and a bit of a reputation.
Yeah, he's a character, our Mr. Clive Palmer.
The articles you sent about him are, well, something else.
He's not your average businessman, that's for sure. He's got a history of, what's the word, grand ventures, let's say.
Right.
And the thing is, this Titanic II, it isn't even his first attempt. Remember back in 2012?
Yeah.
And then again in 2018?
Yeah, those deadlines, they kind of just came and went, didn't they?
Let's just say there were a few hurdles along the way. Money, logistics, you name it. But this time does feel different. This 2027 launch date, they've got a new design firm involved, Delta Marin. And Palmer seems much more, well, focused this time around. They've tackled those roadblocks head on.
So less talk, more action. I like it. That's reassuring from a practical point of view, at least. But, and I think we have to address this, isn't building a replica of a ship that, famously sank kind of tempting fate?
That's the question, isn't it? It looms large over this whole project. But calling it a replica isn't really accurate, is it? What they're trying to do here is fascinating. It's a blend of paying tribute to the original and some very, very modern engineering. They had to modernize.
It's like rebuilding a Model T, but it's got to meet modern safety standards.
Exactly. The blueprints you sent. Some really interesting decisions there. Things they had to consider for safety, but also just because, well, the Titanic's tech is over a century old now. The hull, for example.
Ah, the part that keeps the water out. Important one, that.
Crucial, I'd say. Original Titanic. Riveted hull. Standard back then, but nothing like as strong as a modern welded hull. Back then, shipbuilding, it was as much art as science, I reckon.
And I'm guessing sealing it up with hope isn't, an approved method anymore.
Not quite. So, welded hull it is. And that's just the beginning.
Oh, there's more.
Oh, yeah. The engines, for example. Forget those massive steam engines. Titanic II's going diesel electric. Powering, get this, 3 azimuth thrusters.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to need a translation there. While I admire the enthusiasm, I'm not fluent in nautical. What are these, what did you call them, azimuth thrusters?
Think of it like tiny propellers on each corner of the ship. But they can spin all the way around 360 degrees.
Okay.
So way more maneuverable, especially in tight spots. Much safer to navigate than the original.
So less full speed ahead, whatever's in our path, and more, let's carefully maneuver this multi-million-dollar ship with extreme caution.
Exactly.
Gotcha. What else did they have to drag into the 21st century?
Well, they couldn't exactly ignore lifeboat regulations, could they?
Right, because nothing says luxury cruise like not enough lifeboats.
Exactly. They've actually added a whole new deck, tucked
Mhm.
in between the existing ones so they can keep that iconic Titanic look.
Hiding in plain sight sounds like they're walking a tightrope between historical accuracy and, not repeating history.
It's a balancing act, that's for sure. And for good reason. I mean, look at what happened with that Titan submersible recently. It's a reminder that even with all our technology, the ocean, it demands respect. Things can go wrong, very wrong.
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, we're talking about a project that's, let's be honest, inviting comparisons to Well, a pretty huge tragedy.
And that's where the controversy comes in.
Right, exactly. Are we honoring history here, or is there an element of, I don't know, tempting fate?
It's the question everyone's asking.
Yeah.
And it gets to the heart of what this Titanic 2 really represents.
Because on the one hand, it's this incredible feat of engineering. We've come a long way since 1912, right? In terms of shipbuilding, safety, all of that.
Absolutely.
But you can't escape the legacy of the original Titanic, can you? The lives lost, the sheer scale of it. It's kind of seared into our minds, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So it all feels a bit, I don't know, almost contradictory. Like we're trying to rewrite history, give the story a different ending, but it already has one.
That tension between the past and the present, tragedy and ambition, I think that's what makes this project so fascinating.
It's like Palmer saying, look, the Titanic sank, but this time we'll get it right.
And to do that, they've gone to great lengths to recreate so much of the original. The grand staircase, the dining rooms, even those Turkish baths. It's about experiencing that opulence, that grandeur, but with the reassurance of modern safety measures, of course.
Right, so you can step into a time capsule, but one that's had its safety inspection and lifeboat drills, yeah.
Exactly. And that's what taps into our fascination with the Titanic, isn't it? It's not just about the ship, it's what it represents. A simpler time, or at least that's how we imagine it.
Right, which brings us to the bigger question, the why of it all. Okay, we've talked tech specs, the historical context, but what is it about this project, about the Titanic itself, that still fascinates us after all these years?
Goes beyond shipbuilding, even beyond history, I think. It's about our relationship with the past.
Yeah, because we're not just talking about rebuilding any ship here, are we? It's a symbol, a legend, really.
And in a way, by rebuilding it, we're almost challenging the past, daring to think that we can learn from it, maybe even improve on it.
It's like we're trying to conquer that fear, of the unknown, those things we can't control that led to the disaster in the first place.
There's a certain appeal to that, definitely. That human desire to overcome, to be resilient. It resonates with us, even if it makes us a little uneasy at the same time.
Right, because let's be real, there's a fine line between like honoring the past and maybe exploiting it. And this Titanic second, it's walking that line for sure.
It forces us to ask some tough questions about our own motives. Are we really interested in learning from history? Or do we just want I don't know, a slightly macabre spectacle? Something to marvel at?
It really makes you think, would you, if you had the chance, would you book passage on this thing?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's amazing, the reactions are so divided, aren't they?
Yeah.
Some people, they just love the idea. Can't wait to experience this piece of recreated history. But others, they find it, I don't know, unsettling, even disrespectful.
It's like one man's trash and all that, right? But it's not really about trash, is it?
No.
It's how we see history, how we think about tragedy even, and that pull of the past.
It sparked a global conversation, that's for sure. And it was never going to be straightforward, was it?
Right.
It's brought all that fascination with the Titanic roaring back, the ship, the people on it, that whole time period. And it makes us look at ourselves too,
Yeah, for sure. Are we drawn to this because we think we can, like, learn from what happened, avoid repeating it? Or is there a part of us that just wants, I don't know, a thrill,
Yeah.
a brush with history, even if it's, well, manufactured?
Maybe it's both, in a way.
I don't
We've
know.
always loved stories, haven't we? Especially ones with triumph and tragedy all mixed up. And the Titanic, it's got it all, doesn't it? The luxury, the arrogance almost, and ultimately how fragile we are.
We like to think we've moved on, but some things just stay with us, huh?
They do. It makes you think about your own place in the world, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Maybe that's why this idea of rebuilding the Titanic, sailing on something both familiar and completely new, it's just captivating.
It's a journey, all right. And it only just started, hasn't it? But it's got people talking, thinking, will this Titanic turnip be remembered for human ingenuity? Or will it be a reminder that, well, we don't always learn from our mistakes?
Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, this deep dive. It's been anything but shallow. We've looked at history, how we're drawn to the past, and honestly, that line between honoring it and, well, maybe going too far. So is everyone listening? What do you think? Would you get on that ship? Let us know. And until next time, keep exploring.